Alright, so this is Cold War Day 8. This is 8A Vietnam. There'll be 2 on Vietnam, so this will be the first of 2. Now, we have to go back a little ways, okay? But during the age of imperialism, colonialism, the French controlled an area called French Indochina, Indo being the prefix for Inner China. And modern countries here include Thailand, then it was called Burma. Vietnam was then called A-1, as well as Cambodia and Laos. Fast forward a little bit to World War II. Pre-World War II, the Vietnam, as it became known as, was fighting for their independence from the French. They agreed to put those things aside and to kick out the Japanese, with the intention that they would return to power. Now, the Americans actually gave these people training and supplies, etc., on the condition that they would one day control Vietnam. After World War II, what happened? We returned to the French. And so the French are now fighting to keep their colonial possession, whereas Vietnam is fighting for their independence. Okay? Now, the person who we had supported, the group we had supported, who the French are fighting, was a man who's not given name, but he was earned this name, if you will, Bringer of Light, Ho Chi Minh, and his army was called the Viet Minh, the Army of Light, and they're fighting for a unified Vietnam, okay? So as they're fighting the French, and they're going through all these different things, this is right around the time of Korea. In 1954, they ended Korea in what was called the Geneva Conference. What they essentially decided to do in Korea was keep the 38th parallel, and he would have North and South Vietnam, and it has worked. It is still divided today. There's still North and South Vietnam. It's crazy. North and South Korea, rather. So right here, to solve this and prevent it from becoming a war, they said, fine, we're going to split it. At the 17th parallel, North Vietnam would be controlled by the communists, and South Vietnam would have kind of democratic rule. We began to help the South. Soviet Union began to help the North, with the intention, okay, there would be a free election in the South, and they would decide on unification, okay? Now we flash forward a little bit. When Eisenhower takes over for Truman, he inherits and kind of promotes the idea of the domino theory or domino effect. The domino theory is that the belief if one nation falls to communism, neighboring nations would follow. This is basically saying in Indochina, if Vietnam, where we are, falls, that means Bangladesh and India and Laos and Cambodia and Thailand all would become communist. Now, we can't have that under containment, right? By 1954, the U.S. is paying France's war. So we're paying a large percentage. I think it says, yeah, a fourth of this. And this is after Korea just ended, guys, so this is utterly crazy. Why are we getting involved in this again? Now, with Kennedy coming into power after Eisenhower, we actually send more troops and more supplies, etc. And what happens is it becomes a quagmire. Now, a quagmire is not the giggity guy from Family Guy, but a quagmire is a difficult situation that once you are involved in, it is extremely difficult to get out of. Namely, our involvement in Korea is very, very difficult for us to get out of. Now, what makes it even more difficult is that in 1963 there is a coup. The president, No Dinh Diem, will be assassinated in South Vietnam, and there was a lot of speculation that Kennedy's administration knew about it. A couple of months later, Kennedy is assassinated, and so Johnson will become the third president to inherit this Vietnam quagmire of keeping them from falling to communism. Johnson, one of the first things he's going to say about Vietnam is our purpose of Vietnam is not of aggression. We understand, and some seem to forget what it is. And he makes the statement in 1964, we seek no wider war. There you go. So Johnson says, okay, we're not going to escalate the war. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. There'll be no troops. This is not going to be Korea. Then the Gulf of Tonkin happens. Now, the Gulf of Tonkin is the area that surrounds Vietnam. And what happened is the USS Maddox and the I think it was called Turner Joy, were fired upon. So the first thing that happened, the Turner Joy announced they were fired on, which later on we find out they were. 2 days later, the Maddox was fired on. And so there's a big question of, do we send troops, etc. And this is a major selling point here, and there's going to be something on the state test about this, so we have to understand this. Johnson writes the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The wording gave Johnson war powers. Now, if you remember back in checks and balances, and I've said it before, who has the power to declare war? The Senate. The Senate essentially gave President Johnson the power to declare war if necessary. The wording said if any type of aggression against U.S. or allies is seen, the President may take all measures to repel any armed attack. He gets to declare war. This is a big violation of powers, and it can't happen again. Now, we're going to see in class, did the Gulf of Tonkin thing actually happen? I told you the Turner Joy did, but did the Maddox actually happen? And so we'll look at that in class from a man who knows firsthand, Robert McNamara. So wait for that one, class. It's a fun one. Now, that was 1964. We flash forward a little bit. 1968, big deal here. Because of what Vietnam had done, Johnson is not going to run for re-election in 1968. He says, I'm not seeking the presidency, so we don't have this continuation. We understand what happened from 64 to 68 has looked bad on Johnson. And the next video is going to kind of go through that as well as the protest. But the 1968 year was actually so bad, we called it the year of coming apart. We as a nation almost fell apart. Dr. Martin Luther King is shot. Robert Kennedy is shot and killed. George Wallace is shot. We have something called the Tet Offensive, which we will definitely cover. We have violence at the Democratic election things. This is chaotic, among other things. So in the next video, we're going to kind of close it from 1968 on and see what happened in Vietnam. Now, I'm not bringing up protest here because that will be day 9. I'll go into the protest of Vietnam. All right, so look for the next video.